Hello and welcome. My name's Tom, also known as Peryton's Roost, and I'm here today with, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
How's it going? I'm Nate. I'm a fellow DM.
Cool. Is that as far as your introduction goes?
Well, I don't know what to say, mate.
How long have you been DMing for, Nate?
I've been DMing since the era of second edition. So I've been DMing for quite some time and through quite a few different iterations of Dungeons and Dragons. So quite long in the tooth in that respect.
That's long. That's long. And in terms of experience, how many campaigns do you reckon you've kind of overseen or been part of?
I've been in varying capacities. I mean, I've played in and DM'd for I reckon about 20 campaigns and an awful lot of one shots. I'm a big fan of the smaller adventure.
That's quite a lot of experience in my books, I would say. And how many TPKs have you made the players suffer as a result?
We've had a few. I don't tend to keep count, and I think it's easy to forget pain, isn't it? So
yeah. Not for the players, but for you, obviously, it's easy to brush that under the carpet. Okay, so I guess today we're going to be looking at, or want to discuss, what are the best ways to start a campaign and kind of best practice surrounding beginning and starting a campaign. So I guess, Nate, the first thing we should probably talk about when you're starting a campaign is, once you've gathered all your players together and they've started getting their characters kind of made and finalised, character introductions are a big part of campaigns. In your experience, how do you normally go about character introductions?
I think the thing is with a lot of it is it's very much dependent on player experience. I'm always a fan of doing a very in-depth session zero. So where possible, people can come to that session with character concepts. Then I can give them a bit of flavour about the world. So if I'm running a module, I can explain to them what that is. Or if I'm doing something homebrew, I can tell them my side. And then it also means that they can sort of get a chance to discuss their concepts with the other players and work out how they can fit into an adventuring party to get a well-rounded party. And session zero also means that, especially in a lot of D&D games where they're going to be a group of adventurers that have known each other for X amount of time with all sorts of backstory connections, it allows them to have those connections. So when you kick off the first game, everyone, as well as out of character knowing each other, in character has a reason to be there.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. And how do you deal with secrets though, and kind of history or backstory that the players don't want to share initially? How do you deal with that? Do you kind of tell the players, can you come up with a quick summary for your character for session zero, and then you kind of introduce yourself to everyone? Is that how you go about it, or is there a different way?
No, that's sort of the way I do it. And again, you have a chat with your characters, and if someone wants to play a dark, mysterious, brooding dagger in the night, then they might be tagging along with this group of adventurers out of necessity, so the other adventurers may only know their name and where they met the guy. So I think you shouldn't ever force a player to give away more information about their character than they want to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a definite, isn't it? It's because a lot of people play characters which may have a kind of a tragic or hidden backstory that they won't want to reveal at the beginning. But in my personal opinion, that can make it quite challenging for the other players to really kind of understand and get to know that character. And I would even hazard to say that having those hidden backstories, even though seems cool in concept, is more likely a hindrance. But I'm not sure if you'd agree with that or kind of have your own opinion on that.
I think it can be. I think if you are going to have a secret, obviously keep it a secret from the players, but always run it past your DM. So if I know that someone was a part of an ancient order or actually wants to have a link to the big bad guy in the campaign, then I can sit down, you can work with them to try and work that in a way that's not going to disrupt the game, not going to take anything away from other players. So I don't think there's an issue with secrets, but I definitely think that they should only be secret from the player, not the DM, because otherwise a character 6 sessions in can be like, oh, well, actually, I'm the son of the prince of this realm. And that just doesn't fly.
Yes, yeah, and I think you're right. You need to work it with your DM in a way that the DM is aware of the secret or aware of the backstory, and then they can actively work it into the plot that they're shaping.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes there might be points where you want to have a secret, but it just won't fit, unfortunately. And then that's where, between the players and the DM, you can have that discussion.
And yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And in terms of, because I remember we were having a previous discussion where you said that at the beginning of one of your campaigns, I think you said you had your players' characters on trial, and then that's how you
Yeah.
kind of.
So this campaign was sort of a darker campaign, essentially where an evil religious order had overthrown the crown, and were throwing everyone in prison for various forms of heresy, whether that was stealing a loaf of bread or murdering an inquisitor. And that led to a really good introduction because they were quite new players as well. So it was a different way to do it rather than just the standard you walk into a tavern and what do you see. So they explained their crime, which gave them information on where they were and who they were from. And the way I played that as the interrogation was the person that was trying them would ask them questions. So who are you? Where are you from? What brings you before this court? And it allowed the players to have their first touch at role-playing, but also provided information that the characters got to share in a more natural way because they weren't necessarily going to be friends from the start, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. And I actually love that idea. I love that idea so much. And as you were saying, it encourages roleplay in a way for new players in particular, where you, as the DM, can kind of put on a voice for the judge or the inquisitor who's kind of interviewing them, in front of a community or council or whoever it may be. And that kind of encourages them to role play and obviously take the stand as their character and kind of, try to say, oh, I'm innocent, or perhaps they kind of admit their guilt if they're, on a certain alignment on the scale. So, I think that's such an interesting
I think the
way.
other good thing is from a role-playing standpoint, especially for new characters, is it is a very guided role-playing experience. So sometimes when you start those new characters off, sat in the tavern waiting for adventure to fall into their laps, there's so many possibilities. They don't know what to do. Do I talk to the bartender? Do I go outside? Do I wait for someone to talk to me? Whereas in this, it is a very me to you interaction where they can understand the concept of roleplay without almost taking the reins off completely.
It's almost like training wheels, isn't it? It's almost like training wheels in a way that you are restricting the open worldness of D&D, but in a good way. And this is a great way to move on to our next topic, which is kind of the cliches versus the alternatives. And what I kind of mean by that is the cliches is obviously starting in a tavern, with all your characters gathered around. And as you've very rightly pointed out, that opens up way too many possibilities for a new player to kind of wrap their head around. Because if they haven't come to terms with D&D being kind of this open-ended, be-all and end-all kind of game, they're not going to know what to do. But if you kind of railroad them, slightly, with your Inquisition kind of grilling them, I think that's a very, very good way of doing it instead. I definitely agree with that. I mean, what do you think about cliches versus alternatives? Do you think there are benefits to having the cliches?
I think there is. It very much depends who you're playing with. If you want to go for a very traditional swords and sorcery, Tolkien-esque sort of fantasy role-playing experience where the stakes aren't too high, you can have those funny side characters, you're not trying to play things super seriously. I think the cliche is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Cliched setting.
No, definitely.
I mean, again, with alternatives, though, it depends on your imagination. It can be anything. It can be a tavern. It could be a court case. I mean, another great place to start, which is also a bit cliched, is being sat in the back of a stagecoach on the way from A to B, and someone attacks you.
The Skyrim
I think they all have great benefits, I think.
I'm just trying to think of alternatives that, let's say that we're a brand new DM, we want to introduce some brand new players as well, but we don't want to go with the cliche of starting in a tavern. We want to do something different. I mean, one of the ways I've started one of my campaigns is having the bunch of characters on a ship sailing to a new continent. And on that ship, you'd have maybe a few kind of mundane tasks or a few kind of little quests to kind of help the boat sail itself into port as a tutorial kind of session, as it were, before you land and then go into the world of D&D. But I don't know if you have any other kind of starts in mind that you might use in that situation.
I mean, I think somewhere to look is always looking for inspiration, and D&D is one of those things where, especially as a DM, no one can create their own standalone fantasy universe unless they have 40 or 50 years and a heck of a lot of free time. Looking at George R.R. Martin, for example.
Yeah.
So you've got to just ruthlessly steal. So, I mean, somewhere to look, which is a great place for introductions that aren't necessarily mundane, is video games. Think about the amount of fantasy RPGs that you played, from Baldur's Gate to Planescape. There's so many, and they all start with that same generic crawl of intro quests and teaching you the buttons. But the dressing and the locale and the rules are all so different. A great way to do it is look at your favourite media, look at your favourite movies. And they don't even have to be fantasy films, you know. You can take a sci-fi plot hook and you can change the details to fit your campaign.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, you just have to look at, video games, movies, anything can be a plot hook. It doesn't even have to be the main plot. Maybe something happens in a movie, on a side character or in the B story, and you just really like the idea of that, and you kind of just transpose the characters into your players, and then you kind of work with that. And I think this moves into our next point, which is establishing a theme or a campaign feel. And as you were rightly saying with movies, one thing very important in movies and video games is kind of establishing a theme and campaign feel very early on to get the players ready. So in Dark Souls, it obviously sets the theme very clear from the beginning by having lots of kind of death and very kind of muted colours and lots of themes of darkness, death, redemption, etc. How do you, Nate, how do you establish a theme or a campaign feel?
So I think this is where the DM earns their cheese in a big way. When I'm looking at session 0, what I like to do is the players will come to the table with character concept, and I like to give them a little bit of a rundown. I'm not a fan of a DM just being set on send for 15, 20 minutes, but I like to give them a bit of history to the world, any important events that may have happened that lead them to where they are, and a general sense of the themes of things. So if it's all about death, decay, and destruction, I might spend 5 minutes talking about the war that's torn the land asunder for the last 25 years, that they've just sort of started at the end of an uneasy peace on. Whereas if it's a more traditional high fantasy thing, I'll talk about the king in his castle has gone missing, and just give them a bit of a hook, a bit of an idea about what the plot's going to be about. Is the first way I'd do it. And then when you actually get into that first session, that character introduction, that first bit of role-playing with the group, you need to have an air of the feeling of the campaign through the NPC. So let's take the tavern, for example. We're going to use that cliche. It's going to be great. And we're going to set it in three different settings. Mm-hmm. The first one is that war-torn end of an era. The second one is a prosperous land. And the third one is a tavern on a settlement on a completely unconquered continent. Okay. And they're three identical scenarios. You could even describe them wall for wall exactly the same. But those NPCs in the first scenario might be downtrodden. They might be struggling and suffering with the strife of war, rather than the tavern being full of laughing and revelry at serious conversations and sullen-looking soldiers. The third one, looking at the adventures on a forgotten land, it could be full of different, colourful people all looking to strive forward and make their fortune, all talking about different things that are on that continent and just dropping constant hooks for the players. Or in the more traditional setting, that's where you get someone that's lost their chicken and needs you to go and find it. I think it's that call to adventure can be how you can establish your theme very effectively, I think.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that. I mean, the NPCs need to be almost like a kind of a mirror reflection of the theme that you're trying to portray. So if you're going for a very heavy, dark theme in your campaign, as you were saying, having the NPCs kind of oppressed, or having them fearful, or kind of having public spaces being sparse and empty of life, laughter, or just people in general, is a very good way of reflecting that theme. Would you say quests And I know quests go hand in hand with NPCs, but would you have your quests reflect the theme and campaign as well? And how would you do that?
Again, I think it feeds into the narrative you're trying to tell. So if it's all about an evil army that's taken over the land, your quest might not be initially to destroy the emperor and retake the land. It might be something as simple as someone's asking you to help them smuggle weapons. I think if you're starting a campaign with new players, the quests need to be relatively low consequence. Otherwise, if you're pitching them against the big bad from the very beginning with a new group of players, it can be very intimidating, or they can end up rushing into a situation they're far less than prepared for. I think that changes when you've got experienced players, because they will understand when to run away. So you could start, again, with this cliche of being in the tavern, and then out of nowhere, the night goes dark, the sconces blow out, and a lich bursts through the door and his undead minions begin tearing the place apart. Experienced characters would know they can't win that fight and they'd run away.
Yeah. I
think if you're playing with first-timers, you're just setting them up for an early TPK and turning them off the idea of D&D.
No, agreed. And that brings us kind of onto our next point, which is, do we go for an instant main plot straight from the tavern? Do we have the kind of the main NPC approach the party and say, hey guys, I've got this big quest I want you to embark on? Or alternatively, do we go for this slow build up, starting with a few starter kind of easier quests and then work our way into that main plot? Do you think that's best practice though? Do you think it's best practice to have the main plot bam straight in the beginning, or would you rather tuck it in somewhere a little bit further down the line?
I like to usually tuck it in a little bit later down the line. I find, and as is the same with every DM, that you can plan and plan and plan and have thousands of hours of content prepared. Your player characters will come in, will stick a knife in the neck of the first NPC that's meant to give them a quest, and then we'll go on a complete tangent. So I find if you drop the main quest in front of them and tell them exactly what they're going to be doing for the next 20 levels and 100 hours, it's just setting yourself up for a lot of hard work wasted. If you can use the environment that you've set, if you can use the characters and those little quests to set them up to almost chase the main quest on their own, that's when you get a lot more buy-in from players. So if we are looking to topple the Overlord, if they help smuggle weapons, if they can be given a quest by someone who's lost their husband to war, they build that emotional connection into wanting to destroy the Emperor, not just being told, hey, thanks for coming, by the way, you need to take out the big bad.
Do you think that raises an issue, though? Do you think that raises an issue for new players having a lack of direction, though, and not having a main plot instantly dropped into their laps? Do you think that will have them kind of dither around the world for a bit too long, kind of turning them off to the idea? Would you not be worried about that?
I think it is a worry, but it's all about how you play your characters, your NPCs. There's a very big difference between railroading and guidance, but if you find your players are just wandering about town for 3 days, it might help for a messenger to come and give them a summons, or for them, like I said, to experience something dropped in their laps. The advantage you've got of being the DM is you can control the pace of the game, and if you know your players, and if you know what they want, you can sort of see if they're losing interest or see if they need a bit of pushing, because in the first 5 sessions just wandering about town, winning arm wrestles and helping rescue fair maidens, but those ones that clearly aren't, that's when you might need to give them a push or a nudge in the right direction. And just be open and honest with your players and say, here are your options.
Okay, so I guess from what you're saying there, it's almost like you need to have a conversation, session 0, as people are doing their character introductions, kind of asking them, what do you want to achieve from your D&D campaign, kind of full stop? Are you looking for a kind of quest to drop itself in your lap and then you focus on that main quest and a main dungeon? Or are you looking more to kind of explore the world at your leisure and then kind of stumble across interesting kind of plot or interesting quests to take you into the main plot? I think, is that roughly what you're kind of insinuating?
Not so much that. I think it's important in session 0 to definitely find out what you want from your players, but rather than asking them if they want what they want from the story, because that is definitely your realm as the D&D, the DM, sorry. You need to ask what they want from the game. Do they want to be slaying monsters all the time? Are they there to roll dice and have combat and essentially just use all of their powers and spells and cool magical items to just blow up steadily bigger and bigger bad guys? Or are they looking for a more immersive role-playing experience where, sometimes the character interactions can talk you out of the situation? Because that can inform how you quest and how you signpost things. If you know they're all about combat, then you could essentially push them forward through things like bounty boards or through an arena. If you know they're all about intrigue and role-play, then maybe you can have them overhear a conversation that they're trying to listen to and then being given a plot hook about something completely different. And what I like to do with my campaigns is I will have a bad guy, I will have the level 20, what I expect they're going to fight at the end of it, and a couple of key plot points, but otherwise, I like to keep it quite fast and loose and have several hooks, so that wherever they are, they can learn a bit of information or they can glean some information that might lead them to a quest or to a location. And that allows the story to evolve more naturally, like you said earlier, without just thrusting an enemy upon someone. But at the same time, because they're being given things that interest them to pull them forward, they don't end up getting stuck or things going stale.
Yeah. And I guess with the plots then, and so you have a main bad guy, let's say, and you have a few major plot points that you want your players to, or you will, roughly direct them to in order to keep the main story going. Would the quests surrounding this main plot, would they be adding to your main plot? Would they be adding to the main story, or would they be more like B stories and kind of supplements?
It'd be a mixture of both. It's interesting playing Dungeons and Dragons, or any tabletop role-playing games, the Dungeon Master, in that you have to be very adaptable. When I played with my first group of adventurers, they fell in love with the barman in the first bar. It was a big old orc called Grognak. And I literally just put a voice on and expected no more of it. But they constantly went back to that bar. They were asking about him. And so you drop them in. You feature quests or things that happen around that guy, for example. Or you might find that your players have decided the way they're going to take out the bad guys, they're going to sneak into his palace and assassinate him. Rather than how you planned it, you might have thought they're going to take part in this grand battle. So suddenly, your quests need to facilitate how they can break in. That might be a case of stealing the guards' uniforms. That might be a case of finding out rotations for patrols. So I think in terms of your quests, they need to supplement the story, but also supplement, again, what the players want. Because ultimately, you as the DM aren't there to tell your grand story. You're there to play and work with your players so that you both have an enjoyable time.
So yeah, no, Nate, I completely agree. I feel like, yes, Session 0, not only are you establishing the characters, you're establishing what the players want as well. Do they want something combat-focused, combat-heavy, or are they looking more intrigue, puzzles, traps, things like that? And then once you've established what they want, then I guess you can fit the theme and the campaign feel around that as well, so it's relevant. And then you can also fit the main plot or kind of like a slow build-up to that. So let's say we've got those points down. You're midway through Session 1, at the very beginning of the campaign. How can we go about encouraging these players to really engage with the world through roleplay?
So I think there's 3 big key areas. So my top 3 tips for a new DM is, number 1, explain what roleplay is to your players. Some people, so when I DM, I love to put a voice on, throw my hands about, stare into the eyes of my players, and really try and engage them. Some people aren't comfortable with role-playing like that. Some people role-play in the third person. So they will say, my character looks across the room and asks another player, can you do this? And I think firstly you have to explain to your players that is absolutely fine. Because if you put someone in a situation they're uncomfortable with, if they don't feel socially confident enough to do that, then they're never going to engage roleplay. They should be turned off by the whole idea of D&D. My second tip would, again, be engage individuals. If you are playing an NPC, if you're voicing an NPC as a DM, and you're asking characters a question, and you see someone who's not really picking up on it, look at them and speak to them in character, to their character specifically. And that might encourage them to reply to you and buy into things rather than letting the group look around and think what they want to do. And thirdly, I think engaging their characters. You spend a lot of time creating the backstory for your D&D universe. Players spend a lot of time working out their characters. And if their character is a half-orc barbarian, when they walk into a bar, when the barman looks at them, they could say, haven't seen people like you around here, big guy. You can look at their character and you can play on what they've done to make them feel like you've listened, I think.
So in terms of your 3 tips then, I guess finding out what roleplay the players want to do. And you know what, actually just thinking about my own campaigns, I think that's really important because, as you were saying, some people are not comfortable in acting out their character. Some people love doing it. And I know myself as a DM, I completely agree with you. I love acting out. I love throwing my hands around, putting on a voice, doing comedy voices sometimes to relieve tension, or putting on a really serious tone to kind of elevate the stakes. I love doing that. But again, I recognise that some players are not comfortable doing that. And I would even say that having them address their characters in the third person, it does not detract from role-playing at all. I think sometimes doing it in third person is even better because it's like someone's reading a book to you. And I find that can be even more intriguing than them putting on the voice, because you kind of get an idea of this character as if they were in a book. So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, are there any other tips that you'd have for encouraging roleplay? Any other kind of campaign things you can drop in?
Just trying to think, to be honest.
Do you have a certain...
We'll just drop little details or unimportant, insignificant things on the players and allow the players to work those things out. Asking the question, finding out backstory as well, finding out who the character is, where they come from, and that's where the interrogation works quite well, I find, or the grand judging of the player, in that they can get what they know out in the open, and that can help push players to encourage other players to roleplay. Ultimately, you are only 1/5 of a 4-person D&D game. They can roleplay around the table. They don't always have to just metagame and ask someone what they do. They might have an in-character conversation or an in-character like or dislike of another player. And that, I think, can sometimes help bring people out of their shells as well.
So do you think addressing their backstory directly in terms of having a plot involve maybe a town that they've come from, or somehow the bad guys are aware of the family they left behind, something like that, do you think that can encourage roleplay?
I think over time, yeah. It's not necessarily a session 1 thing. The first session starts and suddenly all 4 characters' families being held hostage by the bad guy. It's a little bit Super Mario Brothers, you know?
Yeah.
But I definitely think knowing your characters is definitely a great way to do it. So if you're playing with a paladin, for example, you can have him come across a temple in the woods that might, for example, make him question his faith. If you're playing with a sorcerer, you know that they got kicked out of their village because they used forbidden magic. Again, you could try and tempt that player with another forbidden spell. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how you fit the quests in, and should all quests support the main narrative? And sometimes they should, but sometimes I think it's okay to just have an entire 4 or 5 sessions about helping one of your players discover their hidden past or find a particular religious relic. And I think if you get a good group of friends and a good group of players, they're happy to help that person, because eventually at some point in the campaign it'll be their turn in the spotlight to have their backstory explored and maybe even dig it down a bit into it, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess leading on to our next point, I mean, we've talked about establishing a lot of things in kind of session 0. And then one of the things to establish in session 0 as well is kind of like the house rules, or your individual rules as a DM. How do you normally go about that? Do you drop in scenarios where those house rules would come into the game and then explore them that way, or do you address them before you've even started?
I think it depends on what they are. I mean, for example, if I wasn't going to allow feats in my campaign, which I mean I always do, people can talk till the cows come home about what is and isn't broken in 5th edition. But it's worth letting players know if there is going to be a certain mechanic that's out of bounds. because the last thing you want is a player getting ready to pick their kick-ass 5th level spell, and then when they go to cast it, you're like, oh, well, actually, there is no resurrection magic in my universe.
Yeah.
So I think from a mechanical standpoint, you need to establish those house rules outside of context. I mean, what sort of house rules have you got? I mean, it's quite a broad old question, isn't it? Like, what sort of thing are you thinking about?
Well, I mean, one of the main ones that I have in the campaign that I'm running at the moment is in regards to initiative. It's a bit controversial, but I don't really do initiative. I don't really have the players do that. It's very... it's very situational in my campaign, where I put the players in order that I feel would be correct in the situation. So if the attackers have jumped down from this ceiling and are ambushing the party, the last thing I want is all the party members to go before the attackers that have jumped down. Now, instead of fudging the rolls and being like, oh, all the attackers have, got a higher initiative than you guys, I like the idea that I can manually place it so it works kind of thematically and story-wise, that these guys who've jumped down from the ceiling, it doesn't matter how quick or dexterous you are, they will get the jump on you. So
yeah.
in that kind of scenario, I don't normally allow initiative. I may be completely wrong, and people are welcome to disagree with me. It's something that I'm doing for this campaign. It might not be something I do for other campaigns, but you're more than welcome to disagree with me. For me to introduce that into my campaign, how did I do that? I kind of just introduced it through combat. I just did it while we were playing the game. Yeah. But I can agree with you that there are some times where you need to address that before the session even starts.
100%. And I mean, I think it's interesting, especially like you and I, we homebrew a lot. We like to just sort of create a story and run with it. But it's not everyone's style. Some people enjoy running adventures, whether that is Curse of Strahd, Tales from the Yawning Portal, things like this.
Mm.
And within those books, I mean, even everyone's a fan of Critical Role. The universe of Tal'Dori's got special resurrection rules that you can play. There's a lot of different modules that have different optional rules. And if you're playing with seasoned players, new guys, it's always good to outline those rules, because nothing makes you look less experienced as a DM than encountering a situation in game, thumbing through 80 pages of the adventure guide, and then being like, let's retcon that, you can't do that. And that's not what you need,
Yeah, I think it just comes down to make a judgment and then look at the rules after the session, because sometimes there just isn't time to go through the rule book and look up how these two particular things kind of interact. You just have to make a judgment as a DM, your fairest ruling that you can put out there, and then after the session, feel free to pick up the book and learn and kind of read into it a bit more. But just to keep the flow of the session going, you have to roll with it, roll with the punches.
Yeah, of course. And sometimes that's how house rules are born. Like, I've had it before, especially when I was quite new to DMing, where I would play something and I would make a call, and it would not be a rules as written call, because, like you said, I didn't want to slow things down by thumbing through the player handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide. And so what I did after the session was I said to the guys, look, in this session, I made this call. The actual rules as written are X, Y, and Z. For the sake of consistency, I'm happy to go forward with the new house rule, as it were, unless anyone particularly wants to go from now on forward with rules as written. And I think, again, it's all about being open and transparent with players. Sometimes you do make a bum call as a DM, and if you're open to that, the players will see that you're being fair, that you're not playing against them, you're playing with them.
Yes. No, I think if you're open and honest with them after the session and just said, you know what, I made a call on this, I was wrong. However, I just, to keep the session going, it was essential for me to make that calling. But yeah, no, being open and honest with it. And like you were saying, your players may even turn around and say, well, I actually like the way you did it more than how the book is telling me to do it. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think that, yeah. And like you're saying, that's how house rules are born, essentially. Okay, so we've talked about character introductions, cliches versus alternate starts, establishing a theme within your campaign or story, also kind of introducing the main plot, whether it's an instant one or a slow build-up, and also encouraging roleplay and house rules and how they kind of work into your campaign as well. So I guess to finally summarize on what we talked about today, Nate, what are the should we say, the 5 things that first-time DMs can take away from this for their first ever campaign?
The top 5 things, if you are just reading the first and the last page.
Yeah.
Well, I think number 1, session 0 cannot be underestimated. If you get together with all your 4 new friends to play a campaign with, don't feel like you're wasting everyone's time spending 3 hours going through the characters, going through the campaign, and getting everything watertight ready to start. Number 2, plagiarize, steal, look at your favorite films, books, TV shows, YouTube videos. Like, if you watch Critical Role and they did something well, great, take it. And that can feed into how you establish your opening credits, that big crawl where the name of the campaign pops up on the screen. Third for me would be use your NPCs. They're not just there to drop a single line of text. They can be super important in building a campaign theme. Number 4, be open and honest with your players. If you're going to have house rules, tell them ahead of time. And if something becomes a house rule, then again, let them know based on the call you've made. And finally, number 5 is you want to understand what your players want to get out of the game, and also understand your player characters themselves so that you can take them and really build them into your story. So their story and your story as a DM will come together to make sure that everyone has a great time and wants to spend time in the world you've been so lovingly crafting.
That's absolutely amazing. Nate, I can't thank you enough for joining me today and going through kind of how to start your campaign, whether it be your first or whether it be your last or whether it be just another one to your portfolio. I think it's been really useful. So, Nate, thank you for coming on today.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
No problem. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Tavern Talk with myself and Nate. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to my channel for more magical items, D&D discussions, and other things. And until next time, guys, catch you around.